U.S. officials have taken an increasingly tough line on the Islamic Republic. U.S. Vice President Dick Cheney said last week Iran is at the top of the list of world trouble spots.
Iranians think of themselves as a country with a long and deep tradition. And when the United States comes to Iranians and says, you're not democratic enough, you have to build a democracy in this country, catch up to the world. And their answer is, wait a minute, we had a democracy until you came in and crushed it in 1953.
Just 2 weeks after the September 11 attacks, a secret memo to then White House counsel Alberto Gonzales concluded that George Bush had the power to deploy military force preemptively against any terrorist groups or countries that supported terrorists, regardless of whether they had any connection to the September 11 attacks.
The United States, much more so than in the past, is trying to secure access and control the world's remaining energy reserves in West Africa, in the Middle East, and in the Caspian region. And this has led to this geopolitical struggle.
Paul Wolfowitz and Douglas Feith, who's the Undersecretary for Policy, these are the guys that brought us Iraq, really, and with all the misjudgments. And they have been pushing very hard to get ready to do something with Iran.
Our people need to know what's going on in the world. We need to know where our tax dollars are going and what our foreign policy is doing. In essence, they're taking money from the World Bank and the IMF and the Inter-American Development Bank and the Asian Development Bank, and the economic hitmen are filtering it through the third world countries, and it's coming right back to our own country, to the big corporations. And these third world countries are then left holding this a tremendous amount of debt. When the economic hitmen fail, the jackals are sent in. These are CIA-sanctioned troublemakers. They try to foment coups in countries, as they did in Venezuela with Hugo Chavez. And if that doesn't work, they assassinate people. When neither the economic hitmen nor the jackals succeed, then as a last resort, we send in our young men and women to die and to kill.
We live in an oligarchy today. Power is concentrated in the hands of a few. It's a scary time, and we're sliding towards fascism. The Bush administration's policies of global domination, of preemptive strike, constant war, perpetual war, is, Benito Mussolini's wet dream.
Civil rights and legal experts say that millions of U.S. voters, especially blacks, will be blocked from voting in the November 2 presidential election by legal barriers, faulty procedures, and dirty tricks.
An analysis by Scripps Howard News Service found that Ohio recorded the second highest number of missing votes in the country, behind California. Nearly 97,000 ballots, or 1 out of 50 ballots, cast across the state either did not record a preference for president or could not be counted.
Who don't even have to go to the extent of construction of a ballot in Florida, which is confusing at best and crooked at worst. You can just take care of the election with the group of programmers if you want.
Given the provisional ballots and the spoiled ballots and the anomalies that are being uncovered in the vote tally in Ohio, that it could make the difference between the Bush and Kerry count that they have now.
What our recounts and our investigations have proven beyond a shadow of a doubt is that these elections were marred by machinery failures, marred by voting suppression tactics, and voting rights violations aimed at suppressing the vote of African Americans and young people on college campuses. And I think it's really important for the people of the United States of America to understand just how serious this issue is and just how complicit corporate media is in the problem.
A new technology called smart breeding is producing crops called super organics. The new technique can produce all the benefits of biotech crops without all the dangers and problems. The plants are resistant to pests and pesticides, have a long shelf life, have rapid or delayed ripening without the worries about environmental harm, and are free from corporate consolidation and intellectual property disputes.
The biotech companies produce a new GM product and they say, well, we've looked at this compared to a non-GM counterpart in terms of its nutrients, its toxins, its substances that produce allergies, and it's broadly similar. And in view of that, we believe it is safe, but it's never actually been tested.
while we were developing industrially, the West, Tibet was learning the inner workings of the mind. They were studying the mind. So as the film says, they developed enormous technology of how to understand how to transform consciousness. And what will matter in the end, the landing on the moon or the understanding of the mind? These aren't just any other minority group that are being genocided off the planet. This is a culture of tremendous value for the whole world to pay attention to.
I've taken a leading Cape Town musician and let him loose on Havana at night, interacting with Cuban musicians and tracking that interaction in a documentary. I wanted to kind of test whether the musicians from both cities could, without speaking the same spoken language, whether they could musically land on their feet.
I couldn't watch the war from my television screen in my living room. I just felt like I would be living in a bubble in a way and not really having access to people who were trying to figure out what was really going on.
Al Jazeera has a pattern of playing propaganda over and over and over again. What they do is when there's a bomb goes down, they grab some children and some women and pretend that the bomb hit the women and the children.
The very real footage that Al Jazeera showed is obviously what the United States reacted to.
Cleland, one of the commission's most outspoken members, publicly accused the White House of trying to undermine the work of the commission and said George Bush is scamming America.
There's an important piece of logic that's been missing from the American conversation about terrorism, and that is, I believe the Saudis had an awful lot to do with 9/11. Without the Saudis, you really don't have 9/11. The Bush family, in particular, has been extremely close to the Saudis. So that raises the question of, did the Bush White House give the Saudis a pass?
But most of the experts with whom I've spoken have a general agreement on what are the major questions. One is, why were fighters not put in the air in the same way that they had been 67 times in the calendar year previously? What overrode standard operating procedures? Additional questions have to do with massive insider trading on the financial markets that took place around the world. CBS News even acknowledged that alarm bells were going off on September 10th, clearly showed that somebody had advanced knowledge that these attacks were going to take place.
We had a timeline. We knew what cities were going to be targeted. We knew what kind of people were planning and plotting this stuff. Attorney General Ashcroft, on October 18, 2002, personally asserted the state secret privilege in my case.
That led me to Sibel Edmonds. I'm not under a gag order. She found drug trafficking, money laundering, she found foreign names, and she found American names in the financing of 9/11.